You know, when you think of post-war America, you'd imagine a time of just pure celebration, right? But the reality was way more complicated. It was this strange mix of public parades and really intense private paranoia. And today, we're going to talk about a story that sits right in the middle of that tension. It's a story about secrets, who was forced to keep them, and who was absolutely destroyed by them.
Okay, let's just jump right into the core paradox of this whole era, because it's a wild one. On the one hand, you had the government going on this massive hunt for people who were supposedly keeping secrets from it. But at the exact same time, it was forcing a group of its own heroes to keep secrets for it. I mean, how does that even work? Getting your head around that contradiction is pretty much the key to understanding this entire moment in history.
All right, so to really unpack this, let's start with the side of the story everyone could see. We're talking about the public side, this widespread culture of fear and suspicion that completely took over the country. This was the famous hunt for enemies within.
And if you're looking for the person who lit the fuse on this powder keg, well, look no further than Senator Joe McCarthy. In 1950, he gets up and makes this absolutely explosive claim. Says he has a list of communists working inside the U.S. State Department. Now, here's the thing. He never actually produced a real credible list. But it didn't matter one bit. The accusation itself was more than enough to spark a full-blown national panic. So how did this whole thing actually work? Well, it wasn't about finding spies with smoking guns or hard evidence, not at all. It ran on this really toxic idea called guilt by association. Just think about that for a second. Your entire career, your reputation, everything you've built, it could all be destroyed just because you happened to know someone or went to a single meeting years ago that someone, somewhere, decided was suspicious. It was basically a weapon of mass reputation destruction.
And believe me, this wasn't some abstract threat. The consequences were devastatingly real. The Hollywood Blacklist is the perfect example. The government essentially used fear to control the story being told to the American public, banning brilliant writers, directors, and actors from even working. We're talking about careers that took decades to build, just shattered overnight. Not because of treason, but because of whispers and suspicion.
Okay, hold that thought, because while all of this public chaos and paranoia was exploding, a totally different kind of secret story was unfolding behind the scenes. And this is the hidden story of the Navajo Code Talkers. 23 years. No, seriously, just let that number sink in for a minute. For 23 years, from the end of the war in 45 all the way to 1968, these men were sworn to absolute secrecy. They were told point blank that if they ever spoke about their vital role in winning the war, they could be put on trial for treason. This wasn't just keeping a secret. This was carrying an unbelievable weight for their country. And the price they paid for that silence, it was huge. It wasn't just about not getting credit. It went so much deeper. We're talking a spiritual cost. They couldn't take part in their own traditional healing ceremonies. Then there's the psychological cost. They were isolated with this immense trauma they couldn't even explain to their families or their doctors. And on top of all that, it hit them economically. They couldn't prove their service, so they were locked out of things like the GI Bill. It was a total betrayal.
So now we've got these two stories, right, running on parallel tracks at the exact same time. And when you put them next to each other, wow, the irony is just staggering. You had a time when real, proven loyalty was punished with forced silence, while completely baseless paranoia was rewarded with a national spotlight. So let's break it down. On one side, you have thousands of innocent Americans getting publicly shamed, losing their jobs, their lives completely upended, all for a disloyalty that wasn't even real. It was almost entirely made up, imagined by people pushing fear.
And then, on the other side, you have a group of actual, bona fide American heroes who were being actively harmed because of their loyalty. A loyalty that was proven, that was unwavering, and that literally helped win the war.
And this really gets to the heart of the paradox. Think about that phrase, secrecy was safety. But who was it safe for? That's the whole question, isn't it? For someone on the Hollywood Blacklist, being silent was a desperate, last-ditch effort to stay safe. For the Code Talkers, their secrecy kept the country safe, but it put their own health, their families, and their futures in danger.
I mean, just look at how this breaks down when you put it side by side. It is crystal clear. One group is just accused of disloyalty, and the result is public ruin. The other group demonstrates absolute loyalty, and the result is being denied benefits and recognition. We're talking about the very same government, treating two groups in completely opposite ways over this idea of secrecy.
So what do we do with all this? Where does it leave us? Well, It kind of forces you to step back and ask a much bigger question. A question about power, really. Who actually gets to control the story? Who owns the narrative?
And the unavoidable conclusion here is that the state was the one holding the pen. In both cases, the government was writing the story. On one side, it weaponized fear to shut people up and control the conversation. And on the other, it weaponized the idea of national security to bury the truth, denying these heroes their own history for over 20 years.
So I'll leave you with this final thought. In the end, these two stories aren't just history lessons. They push us to ask a question that's just as relevant right now as it was back then. What is the true price of a secret? And who ultimately gets stuck with the bill?